right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on episode 104 of Blowback, Exposing Imperial Decline. We are fortunate to have our two normal co-hosts, Ian Kummer from Moscow, Ben Toth from Pêche Hungry. We've got Alex Fraser, our special guest, streaming live from, are you in Leningrad? Is that correct, Leningrad?
Yeah, St. Petersburg. Yes,
that's the real name. Yes, Leningrad or Petrograd before that, but St. Pete.
Petrograd, Leningrad, and now St. Petersburg. So that's over there on the Finnish border. Come on. Yeah, thanks everyone for joining us. We are enjoying our 101st episode, 104th episode. We titled it "Three Drunken Guys on a Yacht." That is a reference to the recent Western narrative change about trying to blame Zelensky for Nord Stream because Biden is having difficulty figuring out how to deal with it. So he's just going to blame Zelensky. But we haven't talked current events for a while. There's several things going on. Where would we like to start, gentlemen?
I think the Nord Stream the story exploding is interesting for the timing, but can I please make just a quick public service thing or a kind of apology? Because for a couple of weeks, I had this project going on, 10-hour focus days. I can't even, digest news via osmosis. So this day, from the morning until now, that's all the window I had into. Therefore, I'm not as informed as I used to be. I will be once this project is over. But yeah, this morning I saw basically the main stream media like Washington Post and of course the German media going wild of some sort of Volodymyr Z being actually not indicted, but when you're charged under German law for the Nord Stream sabotage, and apparently he's prancing about somewhere in Poland. And I think the Spiegel or one of the big German magazines also said, well, it's the Poles because Duda, some ex-official said Duda had this agreement with Zelensky and they're both in on it. So the blame game has started. And there was another one that I just found hilarious. I don't know who this is. It was just a tweet from, London School of Economics, LSE professor who said Ukraine did a brave and wonderful thing. So in that regard, we went from we don't know. No, it was Russia did it first. Then it was we don't know who did it, but it definitely wasn't Ukraine or NATO. To Ukraine did it, but it's a good thing. I guess that's the current state of the narrative.
I'm curious. Go ahead, Ian.
I was going to say it's worth mentioning. I mean, there was a step you skipped there. I mean, the first 10 minutes of it happening, there was.
Thank you, USA.
Yes, thank you, USA. Of course, that's a Freudian. It was a Freudian moment because when there's breaking news and they haven't formed a narrative for that news, sometimes it's just the obvious comes out of people's lips where they know to keep quiet. Sure. I think.
There was two examples of that, just to cut in. Thank you, USA was a tweet by Radek Sikorski, the foreign minister of Poland. Also, Anne Applebaum's sort of Poltoy, so he's absolute US asset. And the second one was from Liz Truss, who didn't outlive a lettuce in her prime ministership of the UK, who within 10 minutes sent a cryptic text message to, I think, Blinken saying it's done. So these were the two things that came out immediately. You're right.
And, Ben, I was going to threaten you because you are not up to speed as normal. We're going to take it out of your wages. We're going to have to garnish your wages.
And then also my yuan.
Carlo as well. We forgot to mention Carlo. So he is still on assignment. He's really chumming it up with Steve Bannon, and it's going very well for the two of them. So we're hoping to get a full report on Tuesday. But Carlo's definitely expected back as soon as he finishes up his assignment.
So they're going to get matching tattoos. Was last I heard. Him and Steve Bannon are going to go.
Yes, he's going deep undercover with the matching tattoos.
Yes.
Sickles and hammers? Maybe not.
Not for Carlo, I think. Hippy dippy 60s things. Oh, I'm sorry. But Ian, I kind of cut in, so I want you to finish.
I was going to say, the whole thing is that, there is, the Seymour Hersh article basically said this, but, even everybody else said this too, that, there's a very small community of people who would even be able to do a bombing mission like that. It's not something's three. I mean, that's literally what's the Wall Street Journal. That Wall Street Journal article said a couple.
Oh yeah, that was the big one. Yeah.
Yeah, it just made it sound like it was like some frat boys partying. That's what they made. You know, they went out drinking and their yacht, and they kind of decided, hey, let's blow up Nord Stream 2. It's not something you can do without specialized training and specialized equipment, decompression chamber, and all of that. There's a few countries, I would say probably not more than 5.
I don't know. I don't know how you could be skeptical. This is the official, that's going to be in the history books. That's the official story. I don't know how you could doubt this. It's, oh, sorry, that's the German main headlines going full out. I don't know why you don't believe this. This is absolutely, AI has generated it, but this is the real story of what happened. I don't know what's wrong with you. By the way, Dmytro Kuleba, one thing I saw, the foreign minister of Ukraine, said only one nation had the deep sea and the sabotage capability of it. Which by I guess he means Russia, but yeah, come on, that's not the only nation with capability. But yeah,
yeah, I mean, it's not just USA and Russia. I'm sure there's at least 3, 4, or 5, maybe more than that. But it's definitely not more than 10, but it's probably around 5. There's just not many, and you could probably count those people in the hundreds. You know, not thousands, not tens of thousands. You know, probably hundreds.
Brits and Norway, definitely, who were implicated in the Hirsch article as well, at least smaller units or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, because it's fairly common if you have the budget to have a specialized frogmen type unit like the SEALs. But yeah, it's unlikely that Ukraine. It's a little ridiculous, actually.
Yeah, you know, I want to just promote the most extensive and persuasive explanation using investigative open source, material. So it was the day that Jimmy Dore went to the United Nations and talked about. He talked about Nord Stream for some reason. So it's just weird. I don't know why Jimmy Dore was invited to the United Nations to talk about Nord Stream, but he did like a 15-minute presentation, and it was either directly before him or directly after him that somebody else was also invited to do a 15-minute presentation. And it was just overwhelmingly, conclusive, obviously what happened. So it happened during, the Baltops, the big NATO exercise in the Baltic called Baltops. And, I mean, they know exactly. It was like when this jet flew over, turned its transponder off. And I forget exactly. I don't even remember the details, the specific details, but I just remember they were overwhelmingly, persuasive. So I would recommend checking that out. If you just Google Jimmy Dore UN speech and then the entire event that included the other guy talking, he really just lays it out, exactly how that was conducted and at what time. So like we have the exact times and everything that, these things happen. So anyway,
there was just to add to that, there was the young black guy, something Green, I think, who gave a very good expert analysis at the UN. I think Larry Johnson did as well on Nord Stream, right? Larry Johnson, ex-CIA. Or did he do that on something?
I know Johnson has been there. I didn't know what I don't remember what the topic was.
Yeah, I might be mixing up the topics.
I know. I should get that guy's name at least. I can Google it while we
I'd love to know. For both Ian, but Alex, you haven't spoken yet. The Russians.
Yeah, sorry, Alex. We're ignoring
the Russians
you.
In Leningrad. Are they laughing their ass off? Or I mean, even most Europeans, I don't think, believe this stupid story. What do the Russians think?
I haven't really asked around, so I couldn't really say.
Oh, sorry. I thought this would be cafe, I
guess
cabaret night stuff.
I don't think they talk about much, to be honest.
Well,
I don't think
oh, it doesn't even register. I got it.
Yeah, well, I think the default here. My impression. I mean, what my housemate said, he doesn't like going to cafes. Cafes are, a lot of creative, like this one at least, and I think others. They tend to be kind of either creative types or liberals or who else. nice
Yes, Christy.
housewives, stopping in, or hookers. But
At a cafe.
in terms of real, like political types, intellectual types, I haven't bumped into a whole bunch. But my impression is with the Russians, it's mostly just like, oh yeah, well, this is what the ruling class does, of any nation. They plot and they conspire, and they do horrible, violent things against the people, and that's just the way it is. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I just wanted to get like what's on the mind of the Russian public, and Ian and Alex. It's probably Kursk. I mean, that has to be a serious topic going around the tables at this moment.
Yeah.
Let me know.
I would think more.
But the big thing is, and this happens. I mean, this has happened over and over again since 2022. I see Larry Johnson made an article basically saying this, and I see a lot of other people are opinion is, oh, this is throwing Ukraine under the bus. It's a plot to abandon Zelensky. I don't know what these people are smoking, to be honest. It's just they always go for the most sensational interpretation of every event possible, whether or not there's any evidence for it. So, I read that, or I should say I skimmed that article by Larry Johnson saying, oh, this is proof that Zelensky's finished, or blah, 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 we're going to get rid of him, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, ultimately no one on either side really cares about this story. So it seems a little ridiculous to say this is four-dimensional chess to get rid of Zelensky. I don't see that at all.
That's yeah, probably true. But there was that, I think also Wall Street Journal exclusive that, this was from the SVR, the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service, and Narishkin saying the White House is eyeballing Igor, not Kolomoisky, but they're eyeballing a replacement for Zelensky. So I have no doubt that he's actually in trouble. But as for these sensational headlines, yeah, it will be over in a week, I think. It will be just gone out of the system. Right now, Zelensky's name is everywhere. But I'm trying to find. Come on, this guy. He was an ex-asshole. No, not Governor Balitsky. Sorry.
But they've issued. Germany has issued arrest warrants for these non-existent Ukrainian divers, right?
Well, one of them exists, and he's somewhere in Poland, probably being treated as a hero by the people there.
But I mean, they're pretending, right? They're pretending to do their due diligence and following a formal process of investigation, followed by holding people accountable. So it's such a ridiculous sham of it's a hoax. It's just it's a narrative they're going to put out, and it's going to take the pressure off of Biden, and they can just say that anybody that says America blew up Nord Stream, no, that's not true. For the people that want to believe it. But nobody with half a brain is going to buy that. So we haven't talked about the Kursk offensive, really, I don't think, right? Since it happened. Did we?
Even Judge Napolitano learned the pronunciation. It's Kursk.
Sorry. My bad.
Yes.
Yeah.
I still cannot roll my R's like Slavic speakers do. I still can't do that. But
so yeah, what is
I was thinking that's the big topic, right? Around the dinner tables.
What's the 5-second narrative? I mean, and if I was just to say in a couple sentences, it seems like a PR stunt is a good word to use. I know Ian just did write a long write-up on it at thereadingjunkie.com, and everybody can check that out. And I kind of agree with a lot of what Ian said, maybe everything. There was a reason it was so lightly defended. It was so lightly defended because there's not going to be much to gain by attacking there other than, PR. And, there was never a chance they were going to make it to the nuclear plant that generates all the electricity that is, they're still, they only got halfway there. So, it's possible that the Russians understood what was going to happen and said, okay, well, it can happen. We're not going to divert troops from the front, because obviously I think the hope was that they'll have to divert, a lot of troops from the Donbass front to deal with that. And Russia kind of, obviously didn't do that. But, what is Ukraine gaining from it other than some headlines for a short term and then losing a lot of the people that were involved and a lot of the equipment that was involved? What is Ukraine going to benefit?
Well, Ben, if you want to pull up that link for something to look at.
The reading junkie thing. Yes. I can actually. Yep.
Oh, hold on. I can give it to you unless you have it already.
No, I'm just going to go to the site, and it's probably going to be the first one, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's also in the links. Did I say that? It's in the links.
I have it, and I will present now. Yeah. Yes. By the way, this map would be great if you just zoomed out and saw the actual size of Russia, because this is a tiny little. Go ahead.
Yes. So basically, there's a lot of debate about why Ukraine did it. What was the goal? I mean, there's theories about trying to go for the Kursk nuclear power plant. There's even people claiming, they're going towards Moscow, which is, of course, silly because I don't think these people passed a geography class in their life. But the main thing is that, any large border, you can't defend it at every point. There's not even a benefit to defending a border. Putting your army at the border has never benefited anyone. Actually, that's what Poland did in 1940. They anticipated Hitler was just going to do a land grab and wasn't going to annex the whole thing, which he actually did. So they put basically their whole army right up at the border, and that just got it completely surrounded and cut off and destroyed in the first 2 weeks because they had no defense in depth. So that's why typically you don't put your whole army right at the border. If there's a cross-border incursion, it doesn't really matter what country it is. Any country with a large land border is going to have this problem. How do you respond to an incursion across the border? Well, you really can't stop it right at the border. That's not possible. The best you can do is have sufficient reserves to respond to a cross-border incursion. So I think Ukraine picked this because in this article I mentioned about a year ago, I was anticipating some sort of incursion towards Belgorod, which didn't happen. And I think,
by the way, there was news. I think the New York Times this morning said that there's also they said the title was "It's expanding," but it's all about another failed incursion into Belgorod, the Belgorod People's Republic. That completely. I mean, they talked to the guys, and basically everyone in my unit is dead. That kind of stuff. But they tried again.
Well, the main thing is that they picked an area that's lightly defended. And the reason this is lightly defended is because it's so lightly populated. The Kursk region, the whole region, has about 1 million people. And about, I'd say close to half of those are in the city of Kursk itself. And the rest, so, you're really talking about, empty force for the most part. So that's why it's not lightly defended, because, if they did. So that's why I think Ukraine got as far as they did, almost 30 kilometers in, but also there was very little of, they captured some dachas, basically, is what they did at the end of the day. So generally I agree it's a PR stunt. I don't think even the claim that it was meant to divert troops from the Donbass front really makes sense, because there's the regular army units, there's the non-volunteer, because they have the volunteer troops in the Ukraine zone, and the regular conscripted forces are in Russia. So really all they did was engage units that were sitting out the war, basically. So they're finding someone new to fight. It's just, I don't see any basis for or evidence for the notion that diverted troops from the Donbass front, especially since there's Russian gains on the Donbass front every day. And I mentioned that also in the article too, is that they're so lightly defended. Like New York was taken yesterday. I think that would have made a bigger splash in the news mainly because of the meme material. Russia took New York.
Yes. Red alert memes coming up.
But and those are towns that, I think even a year or even 6 months ago would have been, weeks or months of fighting house to house, because that's just the nature of this war. And because armies are so mobile now, they just keep, both sides just keep pushing reserves into a contested area. And so there's really no major territorial changes. But if they're just taking town after town every day, that suggests on the Ukrainian side, it's just very lightly defended. They're not getting much in the way of material or ammunition or mechanization. It's just they have nothing to fight with.
From a military standpoint, it was one of the stupidest things ever to be done, because they took the shiny NATO gear, some of the best equipped brigades. There was already a report that a British Challenger was fucked up, and it already made the British tabloids. So they actually sent this stuff into the PR offensive.
Yeah, and that said, I'm not sure Kursk is enough of an explanation for why Donbass is so lightly defended now. I mean, that is a reversal of the Ukrainian, just basically fighting to the death for every square meter of territory. It is a major reversal, and I don't think Kursk alone is enough of an explanation, because I'm seeing estimates that there's probably about 10 to 15,000 people involved in that offensive. So I don't think that by itself is enough. So I think they're either going to attack on a different axis and try to grab some Russian territory somewhere else, or they're going to, what I think is more likely is they're going to just continually try to expand this new Kursk front and hold on to it as long as they can. I think that's most likely.
Yeah, there was reports that further reserves are being sent, meaning they're doubling down on this thing.
Yeah, and that's the problem. They really have, Ukraine is and I think it's the Western support. I mean, they need the Western support. This war would not go on a month longer without Western support, but it's kind of a double-edged sword too, because there's so much public pressure for PR victories, for TikTok victories, as I call them. What Ukraine falls into.
Take a photo.
Yes, it's something called mission creep, and mission creep pretty much means you start a project. And this can happen even outside the military too, even a work project.
I know mission creep.
Yes. You start out with a certain goal, and then you get distracted by, I can do this, and you basically get sucked into your own success and go off on a tangent. It has nothing to do with what you originally wanted to do, and that's because the sensible thing is because there's basically two options for Kursk. If Kursk was meant to, say, seize or destroy the nuclear plant, or if there's some goal we don't know, when that goal failed, the logical thing to do is to withdraw. But even at this point, if they know the original goal,
there's no logic to Ukraine.
If they know, even if the goal didn't work, which I wouldn't definitively say that because we don't know what the goal was, because they didn't. I mean, I will say they improved because they didn't release theatrical trailers. They didn't tell the whole world exactly when and where they were going to attack. I mean, so they did learn something from the TikTok offensive from last year. But I think there's a lot of pressure to not let go of that territory. So even if it would be sensible to let go of that territory, they're not going to, because that would look bad. It looks better whether or not it makes sense to pour reserves into that Russian territory just for the sake of saying they have Russian territory.
Look what we can still do. Okay.
Yes.
Ian, and I'd like to, as long as we have Alex with us, that's why I wanted to ask about Russian I guess the public feeling about this is this morning I just scoured through some also Russian media and social media, and RIA Novosti, I think, led with why Ukraine cannot exist. For example, most of the Russians are talking now about standing together in the name of their hero grandfathers. There's no such thing as, my private gain over everybody else's, none of that greedy stuff. So it's reminded them of who they are, basically what I see in Russia. Welcome to Kursk, memes. And apparently they're there use wearing SS helmets and insignia, and it's absolutely pissed them off. So one of the stated objectives in the Western social media was either to go to Kursk, it doesn't matter, or just take territory, to improve their position in negotiation. What I see from the other side is negotiations have ended. Dude, you just crossed the wrong fucking line, is what I see from the top, from Narishkin, from Putin, from Medvedev, all the way down to Russian social media, that, we're no longer the brotherly people we thought they were. This has got to go. We got to end this. And that's that. That's what Kursk has reminded them of, from what I can see. But you're on the ground. That's why I really wanted to get your perspective.
So, Alex, why don't you take your phone out to the video games outside the door?
I guess I'd have. Yeah,
Uh-oh.
So Alex is. Yeah. Okay.
The Petrograd Wi-Fi is not treating us very nicely.
Yeah,
You're
I'm
moving
on
now.
Network megaphone. So, okay, you can hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yeah. So, basically, yeah, I'm not a very good spy because, I'm like 1/3 of the way towards fluency, basically, in Russian. On Pyatnitsa on Friday, which is tonight, actually. Sometimes I'll go out to Tolsty Fryer, the Fat Friar pub, and maybe I'll meet some truck driver, like last time, and we talk sort of through Google Translate. Otherwise, my flatmate, he's very well informed and well connected, pretty much fairly representative of not only a Russian, but a Russian leftist. I haven't, I had to move out of his place. His mom came from Sakhalin. I'm in a kind of long-term hotel. I did click on the TV, I basically, what I've seen is, there's a lot of dislocation and also, of course, suffering of people in Kursk. And, I think that's always the first instinct is, oh, how terrible, we feel for them. And then, I'll also look at what my Belaruski friends are saying in Bobroysk and Minsk. That's almost like Russia, except Lukashenko was saying it's a more quality Russia. Lukashenko.
He's my spirit animal, old man Luka. Yep.
Yeah. He's a joker. But what was it? What were they saying? Something posted, I guess, by one friend or another in Belarus, and the reaction to the post of like Belarus saying we're responding, or we're getting involved against Ukraine, and then the people commenting were kind of negative on that, and there seemed to be some sympathy for the negativity. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, from what I'm seeing, it's kind of more we feel sorry for the people of Kursk. The people I ran into in Sevastopol, there's Grandpa, he runs the Museum of Communist Resistance, and his grandson, they were basically saying that now they kind of feel that, history is with them, the war is coming to a close, etc.
That's what I
don't really hear. Yeah. Okay. I don't really hear though a lot of like F Ukraine. Let's kill them. Yeah, I think a lot of people, up to date. I mean, I haven't done a lot of asking around or discussing this, but I don't think there's a lot of sentiment of F Ukraine. Let's crush them. It's more, this is a very unfortunate situation.
I'll clarify that later.
I guess F NATO, F the West. But at the same time, you see all sorts of kind of, you know, what would you call it? Zapadophile, you know, Western, culturally pro-Western things floating about, you know, stuff in the English language. Now, this
Hip
is
hop
in
and skateboards?
Leningrad, so it's, I'm sorry, what?
What, hip hop and
Skateboards?
skateboards? I don't know what you mean by Western cultural currents.
Yeah, no, there are kids actually right below me here. Yeah, they're doing the whole skate or die thing. Oh yeah, sure. And there's a big sign at the end on the end of this building. It says "Beautiful People," and you just like, you know, the people will wear T-shirts with like English language slogans on it. I don't know that it's the same thing in the rest of Russia. I think the rest of Russia is more sort of nationalist, maybe, and pro-Soviet. So I'm kind of in a
I
weird
can't read
place,
that. Maybe
perhaps.
you guys can.
Yeah. What does it say? Hold
Or
on.
Zapata after the West,
Oh,
something
okay.
after the West. It's these. Okay, I have no idea what that first word is. Hold on.
Yeah. I just read Zapadom.
Before-
Yes.
Yeah, nothing before the West. I think, is that right?
Yeah, because Pred is for the first word. Oh my gosh, there's like 20 syllables to it. That's Russian for you.
Nothingness before the West.
So
Maybe.
it sounds like it's too early
Yeah.
to draw
Anyway,
conclusions about, you know, the meaning of this incursion and if it's how it's gonna, you know, shape, you know, the what happens next, how it's gonna shape Russia's response, how it's gonna shape the final outcome. You know, as we're speculating,
I mean,
but
yeah.
So Alex, you're saying that it's
I
just, you know, your anecdotal evidence. You don't have any.
But before you
strong-
answer, Alex, I'd like to clarify what I saw on social media was not death to Ukraine and all the people there. They are talking specifically about NATO and the Kiev regime, who they see as shackling the people of Ukraine. That's that. I wanted to clarify that. Yeah, I didn't see like, oh, let's destroy everyone. I didn't see that.
Yeah. I mean, right. What was I going to say in response to, you know, I'm not the best interlocutor because
Yeah.
I'm only 1/3 towards fluency, 1/3 of the way towards fluency. I think, you know, and also there, you know, of course, there are, you know, different vectors of Russian post-Soviet society, right? I mean, there's people who are in the provinces, different age groups. You know, my cousin, Fizbek cousin in Moscow, she'll have one take. You know, some guy who's like a hardcore, you know, anti-Western, pro-nationalist guy. You know, there's a lot of them, I guess. You know, they'll have different takes versus, you know, liberals here or people who are more leaning towards liberalism. You know, but my sense is
That's the
too, it's,
translation.
you know, there's also a sense of, you know, the country was stolen from us. And so there's a sense of mournfulness of, you know, oh, isn't the world, you know, messed up? And isn't this terrible, you know, what's happening in general? Yeah, I mean, I went on a date with a woman. She was, you know, working in the cultural institutions here. And, you know, she said something to me like, oh, well, you know, maybe it's just best to give them what they want. And I was like, oh my God, you know, that's just so horrible to say.
Well, they want it all, so that's a
but
bad.
yeah, you know, what the heck are you gonna, you know, do? So someone commented down below, I could read it all, but I had other thoughts, but they got lost. So yeah, that's good.
They are wearing SS helmets and swastika golden rings, which I've seen a video today that the Russians are collecting. So what they want is to exterminate the Untermensch. Should we give them what they want? It's that ideology, man, and it's just back. There's German, you know, what do you call it? Not the Iron Cross, but the other one. Those vehicles, the Panthers, they are on German territory, and apparently the German press is delighted about this. You know.
Yeah.
But you know,
Yeah,
I'm going to share a story here. Is don't date silly girls. That's the advice. But yeah, you can get. I mean, Russia's like any other country. You can get if you just ask random people. When I was going to the Pushkin Language Institute in Moscow, I guess a year and a half ago. I took some classes there, and there was this Russian girl who was outside, and I started talking to her because she's one of the Russian, because there's Russian students there as well who are getting their advanced education there, and we were talking, and she was asking where I'd been in Russia, and I'd mentioned I'd seen St. Petersburg, and I mentioned, it's different. The weather there is different than in Moscow because it's close to the sea. And she was like, "Oh, it's not. St. Petersburg is not by the sea," and that made me question my own sanity for a minute because it's like I've been to St. Petersburg. It's a port city, and that made me question my sanity for a second here. I was like, "Wait, is she right? Is St. Petersburg?" But no, she's just an idiot. Of course, St. Petersburg is next to the sea. It's not on literally on the beach, but you go upriver and there's a port and there's St. Petersburg. But yeah, you can get silly opinions, I think. And
in every country in the world,
yeah. And also, I think when you ask Russians, what do you think about? When you ask them a bit, or probably any person about something that as sensitive as this, they're often going to speak from the heart that they would like this thing to just be over. No one in Russia wants to be at war with Ukraine because that was the dream after. In the post-Soviet period, because it's like, okay, we're going to let these other nations of people go. Maybe it's not right to keep them in this union. We're just going to be these three brotherly nations of Belarus, Russia, and Ukraine. Great Russia, White Russia, and Little Russia. That was the idea. I don't think anyone anticipated that two states in that little group would be at each other's throats like this. No one certainly wanted that. I think even right before the war started, it's just I remember I would say probably in January 2022, I was watching this YouTube stream by this American. He was some Samoan wrestler or something like that. He's not a political guy. He was just this Pacific Islander guy who likes to travel. And he was in Ukraine. He was in Kyiv at the time. And he was just
come on.
Yeah. And he was just it's just ridiculous that Russia and Ukraine would fight each other, And so I think I wouldn't say that sentiment is wrong. It's just hard. It was just very hard to imagine that it would come to this.
30 years ago, very.
Or even right before it happened. It's just an amazing.
Well, I have one story on that, actually, a point. I went to Stalingrad in October, last yearish, or not, 2023, 2022. I went to Stalingrad, and my guide, who was from there, he had cousins and aunts and everything, people in the Donbass. And when the Soviet Union fell, I think he said it was his aunt or great aunt started having panic attacks like, "Oh my God, the Banderovцы are going to come back." And her nephew,
already in the 90s.
This guy's uncle. Oh yeah,
Sorry.
This was 1991 or 1992, 3, I guess, and. Or maybe 90, 91 even. And this guy's uncle, I guess the nephew of this great aunt, I guess it was, he laughed. They all laughed at her. But but similarly, when the August, putsch in 1991 occurred, my first instinct was like, oh my God, the civil order, if it breaks down, are there now going to be pogroms? Well, we'd been watching Yugoslavia, up till then, and I'm thinking, pogroms against the Jews, so I think there is a depressive attitude. And this buddy of mine also, he's was a sexton at a Russian Orthodox church in Barnaul. And he said, the Russian people in general, not just Jews, but the Russian people in general, tend to be very negative in our world outlook. Because, the last, from World War II or even before on, in Ukraine, it was 600,000 who were basically murdered or killed in the Revolutionary War up to 1922, I was reading. And and that combined with, incomes from the Soviet times dropped by half. The whole breakup of the country was illegal. What was it? 75 to upwards of 90% were against the breakup of the Soviet Union. It was just imposed on us. The whole situation, it's not exactly a bed of roses to understate it. I don't get the feeling, at least not here in Leningrad, of triumphalism. I guess I talked to these two in Sevastopol, or others, even one other in Sevastopol or in Yalta, and people didn't really, seem like they were like "F you." Maybe a few people actually. They were kind of anti-American, but so there's like an anti-American feeling, perhaps, at least in a place like Sevastopol, which is a military naval base, and not so much up here in Leningrad, though. No, there's maybe some paranoia or kind of edginess in terms of all the general situation, but I don't think there's this aggressive sort of, Russia number one, F everyone else feeling. Yeah, yeah. I guess I would, maybe the news reports of, I mean the grandfather and grandson I knew from the Museum of Communist Resistance in Sevastopol. They basically said, well, back in whenever it was March, they were like, yeah, we feel better now. It's like, the history is on our side, the winds are in our favor, and this thing is going to be wrapped up now. So that's sort of
okay. Thank you. I just want to correct myself. In case I gave the impression, I didn't see any triumphalism or bloodlust on Russian social media. It was kind of remembering we're descendants of heroes. They sacrificed a lot to save this world, and this is the last time we're going to do it, even if we have to go to Berlin again. It's that kind of I saw that in a couple of places. Like, this is the last time. That's sort of where they're at, at least on social media.
Yes, and this is classic.
It's most westernized city.
There's kind of a friendly rivalry between Moscow and St. Petersburg too. It's like you can even go buy magnets in like St. Petersburg, saying St. Petersburg's better than Moscow. It's kind of funny. I even watched. There's a famous Russian gangster movie from the 1990s called Brother.
Brat.
And he's talking to his older brother, because they're both in Moscow. They're in St. Petersburg, but their family's from Moscow, and his brother's like, St. Petersburg is, it's too provincial for me. Like, if you told a St. Petersburg native that St. Petersburg is provincial, like, he would want to strangle you, basically.
So the rivalry goes back generations.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So, but yeah, no, she's right. MK is right. It is any city population. I mean, that's true everywhere, though. It's true in the USA. You go to a city, it's going to be more liberal than outside the city.
Most of the liberals in Hungary are in Budapest. Most of the people of the country don't recognize those idiots. They can't speak to them. Yeah.
And I think that actually for some reason journalists either don't know or don't want to know, because they sit, because if you're a correspondent regardless of what country you're in, if you're a Moscow correspondent or Budapest correspondent or a New York correspondent, you're going to sit in your nice flat in that city and say, I talked to all, I went outside, I went to the cafeteria and I talked to people and they all, say this. It's like, well, if you went, 10 miles outside of the city, you'd get a completely different answer.
Completely, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
well, and they don't even have to talk to anybody anyway to come up with those.
right. So, but I think it's especially true with Russia, especially because there's such a language barrier. I'd say there's an even larger language barrier than there is like in Western Europe, because, I would say there's probably a larger a proportion of people who speak English, but it's especially true in Moscow. The bubble of English speakers is so small. You're just in this little echo chamber of people who just mirror the beliefs you already had back at you. So
a big issue with the leaders of Western Europe. They're increasingly bubbleized and in their own little realm.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I had stage 1 colon cancer diagnosed here in Leningrad, like going on 3 years ago, and I ended up having my resection on my operation on the day of the special operation, and that was a real morale booster. Maybe Putin thought of me or something. And when I was in recovery, I was on the cancer ward with Grandpa from Stalingrad. And we're chatting through Google Translate, and we're like, yeah, this is great that Russia finally punched these traitors in the face. And the liberal doctor in charge, he's like, I don't know how old, 60 years old. He walks by and he's like looking at us in horror, some fucking communist American and some Soviet grandpa from Stalingrad, like cheering on the former Soviet Union or whatever, what's left of it, against
imperialist Russia, I guess they thought. Yeah.
So that was good. Yeah. Oh, and I was also, in terms of city rivalries, during the pandemic, before I was diagnosed with cancer, I think, or maybe during that time, I'm in a Chinese restaurant, and I've got my red hammer and sickle virus mask on. And this big slab of beef, he's like 350 pounds, walks over to me in the restaurant, and he starts talking at me like about my face mask. And I'm getting worried. I got my sap on me, right? I got a junior Buchheimer sap or whatever it's called, Boston leather, I think, sap. Getting ready to like knock him out if he like gets real aggressive, because that's the vibe. It's sort of a port town, big goons, Leningrad was known, and still is, but well, more so in the 90s, but for its criminals. It's a big gangster town, I guess, or criminal town. And so, and then all of a sudden he's like, no, Zenit, we wear blue, we don't wear red. This is Leningrad.
It was about the town, the city.
Yeah,
Zenit being a football club. Yeah, got it.
Yeah. The Leningrad Football Club is blue. It's not red.
Yeah.
So you just remind me that liberalism, it's a disease that affects every society, and it's spread by the Western media. Glenn Deason, he does a good job. He talks about the totalitarianism of liberalism. And he doesn't, he does use the word totality. I don't know if he uses the word totalitarianism, but it's really like that. It's like, it's just good versus evil, this mentality. And it's you have to, come up against them. You have to defeat them. And it's this, he used the word totalizing. He says totalizing, but it's totalitarianism. It's liberal totalitarianism. And it's a tremendous problem. But I was disappointed to hear about your doctor. That's too bad.
Yeah, short history of the word totalitarianism. It was invented by the anti-communist left. So just use liberal fascism. I think Medvedev does now pretty frequently when talking about the states of Western Europe.
So was Tanky. I mean, it's always, or Vatnik, like all of the slurs.
Tanky's thanks to Hungary.
All of the slurs for anti-left slurs come from other elements of the left. That's the thing.
Yes.
I've noticed. Like they will, like a liberal leftist will literally align himself with Nazis before he aligns with other leftists. I mean, literally, they would.
Yes.
You can have the most far right regime on the planet, and they will say, "Well, they're at least they're fighting against, totalitarian tankies." It's a little ridiculous.
That's Ben. That's a good point. We're kind of incorporating their language, and we don't need to do that, and that's true. Glenn is. I think Glenn is a million miles away from being a communist. So he's just a rational person, but he sees the problems with liberalism.
Yeah, it's just astonishing that a rational person, I think he's still a professor of something in Norway, that he can still be employed in Norway, which gave us Jens Stoltenberg, their previous PM, who's completely on an anti-Russia crusade. So I think he's a great logical guy. Garland Nixon can't really be a communist, but he sees more clearly than most people you see on mainstream media, those talking head idiots. And I just wanted to make do you want to stick with the liberalism thing? Because I had some other things about Kursk.
Yeah. Well, I was going to add, I just wanted to add to Alex's story. So there is, for an American, Alex, how long did you say you were in Russia? I forgot before.
Years, I know that.
It's
since the SMO, definitely.
Well, yeah, SMO. Well, on and off, in and out. I've got to actually go back in 9 days to apply for dual citizenship in Washington, D.C. But I think I don't know. It's been many months, 13 months, I think, here in Leningrad, and then months in Minsk, or a month here, a month there in Minsk, months in Moscow. So maybe a couple years altogether. Yeah.
So, one thing I'll say as an American in Russia, when it comes to people coming up and talking to you in the USA, I'll say in the USA, if a random guy on the street approaches you, and talks aggressively, you need to be worried. Like he's ready to shoot. Like if it comes that, it's just a guy you don't know comes up and starts aggressively talking to you, you need to be worried that you're about to be shot or stabbed. If you're a woman in the USA and a guy comes up and aggressively talks to you, you need to be worried about being sexually harassed or something worse. One thing when I would go out either alone or with my girlfriend in Russia or with just a friend, and this happened a few times. Of course, the first few times I was worried, like, oh my gosh, some random guy's gonna come up and shoot and stab me or throw a brick at me. Then I kind of realized that in Russia, Russians sometimes are just having a bad day and just want to argue with somebody.
They don't know.
They're not going to come up and they're not looking for a fight. 99% of the time, they're not looking for a fight. They just feel like arguing about something. And if they talk to you and they realize, oh, this person barely can string a sentence together in Russia, he'll just give up. Like you see, it's very funny because sometimes it doesn't happen. I'm not saying this happens every day, but if you go once in a while, especially when I was going to school every day, once in a while there'd be some guy who wants to argue with me, like on the metro or something, and like I would respond to him, and then I would just see like the disappointment in his face, like, oh, this some stupid foreigner who can barely speak. And they would just it was very funny. He would just give up. He'd just be like, okay, I wanted to argue, but there's no point in arguing with someone who doesn't understand what I'm saying. So it is kind of a different vibe. It's kind of an American reaction. If so, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm about to get shot or stabbed. But in Russia, it's usually just some guy who wants to argue with you.
I'll add something to that. It's not just American, it's a Western misconception. I haven't been to Russia, but I've been to post-Yugoslavia, the Slavic countries. Even around here, they're known as the temperamental, the lively bunch, right? Mm-hmm. And they're a bit loudy, and although I never once felt afraid in Serbia, Croatia, Slovenia. Never once, But it's the same in Russia, I think, when you go there with a Western perspective. You start from your Western experience, and that's going to lead you to odd places.
Yeah, no, when I first really first living here, this was going on 3 years ago. It took me 6 months to decompress because, I was a federal anti-corruption hire in the city of Chicago for 15 years. That was very hostile. It was you talk about a hostile work environment. I mean, I had death threats and I had to point guns at people in Chicago. And,
Two Chicagoans meet on the stream. Yep.
Yeah. And right. And, I was in, very dicey situations where I could have been killed. Anyway, I get over here, and yeah, I'm looking over my shoulder for 6 months, and then I finally realized, like, look, I had to look at people's faces walking down towards me on the street, and I was like, oh yeah, he doesn't want to, like, he's not plotting to whatever jump me, like you're saying, Ian. But yeah, definitely in the U.S. There is that. After that, I went to Asheville, North Carolina. I was in the Appalachia for a while. I visited Asheville, North Carolina for a weekend, and that was very creepy, very kind of lumpen criminal. Obama went there. He said, "Oh, it's such a cool city. I like it a lot." Well, Obama's kind of a lumpen, creepy sort of guy. So yeah, it's very, and it's very like Asheville, North Carolina. Yeah, it's very kind of that sort of America. Like on the surface, prosperous and friendly and touristy, but I went to the local bar and like 3 guys had gotten shot there, and my barmate was like this ex-drug trafficker who knew people in like Cali, Colombia. And yeah, I got the sense he didn't like me a whole lot because I was a red. But
that's kind of an
anyway,
extreme,
so
though. Going from there to St. Petersburg, that's.
Well, the thing is, I lived in North Carolina for 4 years because I was stationed there in Camp Lejeune. And yeah, so there are touristy areas, but the thing is about any American touristy areas that the touristy area is surrounded by a ghetto, and that's true for North Carolina. It's very outside of those small touristy areas. It's very poor. It's all trailer parks and ghettos, and of course the different ethnic groups there just hate each other. I mean, hate each other. It's so it is a place to some guy, especially if he's a different race than you. You need to be like worried. Like you might have stumbled into a gang, like literally you might have stumbled into a gang initiation ritual.
These are pretty extreme cases, like going from Chicago, anti-corruption scene, or Baltimore police, going from there to St. Petersburg. That's kind of an extreme.
Just normal. And I'll say when I was talking to because I had met actually. My girlfriend now was one of my Russian friends before I'd even visited Russia. And I remember I'd actually met her on Twitter. But anyway, one time we were talking on Skype, and she was walking in town that I live in now. And she's like 8 hours ahead of me. So it was late at night. It was like probably 11 or 12 at night. And of course, it's kind of a rural town outside of Moscow, so the street lighting is very hit or miss here. And she's just walking around in the middle of the night, talking to me. And I kind of commented like, well, you probably shouldn't be walking around on the street that late.
Why not?
She just looked at me like I was literally she just looked at me like I was retarded. It's like, well, why wouldn't I walk around at night? It's just kind of
I would imagine Russia is way more safe than the United States, but I mean that might not be true.
I mean, it wasn't always safe. I would say even just from the descriptions of like even the worst period. I mean, like even the worst periods in the 1990s when the state had basically collapsed, when the police was non-existent, when every state institution had collapsed. It was still. Go ahead.
Sorry, I'll be quick. Alex said that St. Petersburg at the time was criminal town, and I think that's pretty much all Russian cities in 1992, 3, 4. But now, sorry, continue.
And it's even at its worst, they were still safer than American cities. It was and even like because like even the murder rate, the very high murder rates, which are still kind of on the high side now. They're a lot lower than they were, but even then, it's a different mentality. It's gang warfare. You're on my turf, so we're gonna fight it out. I'm gonna shoot my rival because I don't like him. It's this type of stuff that you see. Gang wars in the USA are very different because it's like literally like drive by shooting a machine gun into a crowd of people like at a barbecue. That's how gang wars are in the USA. It was never like that in Russia, even at its worst. There's just, indiscriminate killing of people. In Russia, if you don't like someone in a different gang, you would just fight him and kill him. You wouldn't kill a bunch of random people. Just the random violence that you see in the USA was never a thing in Russia, for sure.
Right. Honor among
also, I went to the Russian National Library in the last, couple months, and I ended up talking to this guy, the socioeconomic librarian. Actually, it was down the former Yeltsin library here, down by Ploshchad Pobedi, which is where all the nomenclaturi, were put after the war. And so he recommended this book because I was interested in repressions here in the revolutionary period. And so he recommended this book by this professor I.S. Ratkovsky, who is a professor at St. Petersburg U. And the title translates to Red Terror and the Activities of the Cheka in 1918.
Sorry, but based on his name, Ratkovsky sounds like he might be of Jewish descent. Well, sorry, not Jewish, Polish.
Oh,
the Polish archives are very anti-Soviet. Go ahead, Alex. Sorry.
But this was very interesting, and I basically ended up kind of translating it page by page and making notes on the whole book practically through Google Translate. And basically, the short story is that yes, crime got out of control here 100 years ago. In the winter of 1918, the homicide rate in the winter of 1918 went up to New Orleans level. It was like about 50 per 100,000. At that point, the masses in the Soviets and in the workers' councils and peasants, whatever, they got together spontaneously and they said, okay, these criminals are either career recidivist sociopaths, or they're, officers who got chucked out because of the revolution, or cops who got chucked out, or government rat workers who got chucked out. Hello, Slava. Oh, I got a story for Slava too. But anyway, government rat workers, like the city workers in Chicago I worked with, a lot of them were basically criminals or family friends of, and they would go around like basically mugging and murdering and robbing and burning during the winter of 1918. Well, the people said, okay, we're lynching you. So they basically started lynching all these criminals and cops and officers and government rat workers, strung them up on the lampposts, especially outside of, Petrograd. And the Cheka was being organized at this point also. And basically what it came down to is the Cheka said, the Commission of Public Safety said, all right, we don't want you to spontaneously lynch these criminals. We'll catch them, we'll lock them up, and then we have to all agree on the death penalty if it's, a quick job.
Face trial.
Or better yet, Roddick pointed out, or Roddick said in this book, there's a quote, Roddick said, it's best to take 3 of these criminals and put them on public trial in a square in front of, hundreds of workers, and then shoot those 3 workers, or 3 criminals rather, shoot those 3 criminals publicly, rather than shoot 300 criminals without a public trial. And so basically, what that means is, the culture here was collectivist, and the effect of the revolution, still in the 90s and even today is we're not going to put up with we're not going to put up with murder. We're not going to put up with rapes and robbery. If you molest the normal people, basically you're going to prison, or you're getting deported back where you came from.
It's a big difference. There's no, individual Batman vigilantism, but there's a collective, a societal response to
middle class place.
Well,
And,
back to the big.
they're all men are.
Sorry.
The big thing is that
I'll just finish.
I think there's a huge delay. It's making the conversation kind of difficult.
I'll just say that the in the Russian Revolution, it was very hard and extreme. I mean, millions of people died in the Civil War, and I've kind of heard a similar mentality actually from Chinese people. They'll say the same thing about the Cultural Revolution in the 1960s. It was a very extreme time. And I've never seen a Russian person or a Chinese person say, "Oh, that was good, that all
glorious
things that were done in that period was good." They'll say, yes, we understand it was a very extreme and difficult situation. We understand why those things were done. But I've never seen a Russian person or a Chinese person, for that matter, say, that was good. That was good that there were show trials. It's good that those people were killed. I've never really seen them say that. So, I think when there's an extreme situation, especially since it was a different time, the early 20th century was a different time than now. The mentality of everybody back then was different. So I think they understand why those things were done, but I don't think they're going to glorify or want to repeat them either. That's my 2 cents.
Well, it's not
it was a bloody period.
My point is that I think very little from what I've heard now. Yeah, I think, but very little is remembered or known or maybe transmitted even. Maybe it is, I don't know. But, we're talking 100+ years ago, 1918. What is that now? 110 years ago or whatever. But, what I was told was in the 90s, the criminals did not bother the normal people. And generally, there's more of a sense of, we're for order and for construction. And there's far less tolerance for antisocial behavior and criminality, I think, here, compared to, say, America. And what? The crime rate, like by way of example, the crime rate here is, I looked it up, like these good government liberals were saying, basically, if you parse the figures, it's about 6 homicides per 100,000 here in former Leningrad. In LA, by way of example, it's, 9 per 100,000. In Chicago, it's about 30. In New Orleans, it's about, somewhere between 50 up to 77 if things get really out of control. Well, let's just say 50 overall as an average for New Orleans. Anyway, but and aggravated assaults, that's another big indicator. I think here it's like, what is it? 6, about 12. But in LA, it's like in the hundreds per 100,000, right? So the level of antisocial violent behavior in the Western Hemisphere is off the charts compared to over here, where I think the revolution, not just the revolution, I think, there was a civilization, there was the peasant mir and all of that, cohesive culture here that there wasn't in the West. But that's held things together a lot more. And sorry, I'll just finish too. The level of executions or killings here, even let's just say the revolutionary period. That's what I'm mostly interested in. The whole period of the 30s, that's a separate question almost for me. It is actually, I'll say that. But in the revolutionary period here, it was 10,000 people here, I was told, were shot, and that's like maybe 2% of Petrograd at the time. Which is incredibly low. That's like the population here is like 2.4 million at its height. So the level of violence was really, really low, actually. Even the counter-revolutionaries were not able to, they were very gruesome and barbaric in their killing, but their killing was, it was limited because there was so much mass support for the revolution here during that period. Ukraine was another, I guess, it was larger numbers, more horrible. Quantity equals quantity equals quality in terms of Ukraine. But but I think there's more cohesion here, and that revolutionary spirit in a way continues and keeps the society together. Was my point.
That was what I responded to, saying that, there's no sort of like Batman vigilantism. It cannot appear in Russia because first there was the civil war, the revolutionary period, like whites versus rest, and of course the invading armies. Then there was rapid industrialization. Then there was the Great Patriotic War. By the way, I don't just mean Russia. I mean Belarus. I mean Ukraine. They went through that. And then the reconstruction of their countries. You go through this historic experience. There's just no tolerance for individual stupidity when society faces like crucial, even vital challenges. It just changes the society. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to address this. It was a while ago, but we continued this comment from Christy. Do you think it might have anything? American violence might have anything to do with the firearms and gun laws in the USA? I would say. And that's in context to people approaching you on the street in Russia or Yugoslavia or in the USA. I'd say no, because Russia has had pretty tight gun laws for a long time, and they started before the Soviet Union, like under the Tsar. I actually researched them. It was mainly a problem because you give Russians guns and vodkas, they tend to be a little silly with it. Like I'm bored. I'm sitting in my apartment. I'm bored, so I'm gonna shoot a smiley face in the wall. So that's apparently the main reason for restricting guns. But
by the way, that's true of Serbia too. I saw a guy celebrating the gold medal of Djokovic, the tennis star. He went out and emptied an entire magazine of the AK-47 into the sky. That's just Serbia celebrating, guys. That's not aggressive.
Yeah, so that's just what the Russians do when you give them too many guns. But in the 1990s, Russia was trying, I think it was mainly to try to be like America, because America was just the most awesome country in the world, was exceptional democracy in the world. They did loosen up the gun laws quite a bit, and they're still pretty loose. It's much easier to carry a gun. It's much easier. I mean, it's apparently really easy to get a hunting weapon, and it's possible to get even just if you want to walk around on the street and carry a gun. It's apparently pretty easy now to do it, but still you didn't see some huge uptick in gun violence from as a result of those laws. I'd say no, it's more cultural, because gun laws are, permissive gun laws or no gun laws at all are not a new thing in the USA. Because the USA is a colony to begin with. You just have settlers with guns. I'd say it's the problem of people shooting up schools, of people shooting up the street, of people shooting up each other is pretty new. It didn't really start getting like that until the 90s, because it's when you had Columbine, you had that rampant, insane gun violence start. So no, I'd say it's not. And increasing the gun laws is like putting a ban, and that's not just because I like guns, but because it's trying to put a Band-Aid on, a sucking chest wound. It's not solving the problem. It's just trying to treat a symptom. It's a deeper problem that's causing that violence. So I just wanted to address that comment before we went too far in the conversation.
So, we talked about the Kursk. What did we call it? It's not an invasion.
Well, Wikipedia is calling it. I was very curious when I wrote that article.
What is it?
I was like, what are they going? They call it an incursion.
An incursion.
It's not an invasion. It's not an invasion because only bad guys do invasions. Good guys do interventions and incursions.
Humanitarian incursion, I guess.
Yes, it's always an I word. The word has to start with the word I. but there's invasion, or intervention. It depends if you are a good or bad country.
Yeah, I had some final thoughts on that too, but Billy Bob, you started. Go first.
Well, we also touched on what is that called? Nord Stream, the blaming of Zelensky for Nord Stream. And I mentioned Dirk Pullman. That's his name. Dirk Pullman at the UN kind of just laid out exactly what happened as best we can tell with all the available evidence. So I encourage everybody to look at Dirk Pullman. But, there's a lot going on in Israel, West Asia, West Asia. Also, domestic politics here, domestic politics in Britain.
It's a bad time to be in the bunker, basically.
Yeah, so they all have the same spectacles. It's coincidence? I think not.
It's just a meme. I'm not being anti-Semitic or whatever.
Okay.
But some of our audience members, you have to spell that out for them, yes.
And for YouTube, yes.
Do you want to address some of these large geopolitical issues, or we can continue comparing and contrasting, Russian culture crime rates to Western crime rates?
Well, what other current events did you want to hit while we were still on the show?
I wanted to add, as long as we're on Kursk, and then we can go wherever we want, a couple of details, because, the stated objective was, better position. But, the two things they're doing is terror. One is nuclear terror. Apparently on the same day they hit the Kursk MPP, as well as the Zaporizhia one, both under Russian control. And the Russians complained to the IAEA, who were just crickets, nothing. And then the main headline was that the Russians were burning tires at one of the cooling smokestacks, at the Zaporizhia MPP, which is ridiculous. Other videos I've seen is them wearing the Russian red headband, meaning they're doing sort of false flag terror there. And from the Western perspective, it makes sense, because I don't see this as a Zelensky thing. And I was trying to look for a video I saw of this guy today, the beautiful Radek Sikorski. But he's the Thank You USA guy, by the way, Foreign Minister of Poland. And he was being extremely defensive, but still kind of said that if we do this long enough, the sanctions and everything, then eventually, hopefully, Russia will collapse. There will be chaos. There will be collapse. And, from the West, they sound very defensive, very bitter that this is not happening. And I really think, except for some idiots like the Baltics, Poles, and the Germans being revanchists, I still think there's a hope. By the way, there was a New York Times opinion piece by an expat traitor Russian saying Putin's victory in his grasp, right? And it was basically, the West, as is the guarantees for safety in the Western world, the US has lost its credibility. This bitch was regretful that we didn't send enough weapons, enough everything. But even people there at the New York Times knows the writings on the wall. So it's not just for PR. It was more the Ardennes 2.0, except from the Kiev regime. That was my.
Yeah, I mean, you had Ardennes, and you had actually what's kind of interesting about the Ardennes is that Germany kind of did the same trick twice, because in World War I, when the USA was going to intervene in 1918, Germany basically tried to do a major offensive to end the war before American troops showed up in sufficient numbers, and didn't work because of mainly because of the limitations in technology and mechanization at the time. Then they did the same thing, like you said, with the Ardennes offensive in the winter of 1944, which was intended to push the Western allies out of the war. They would just capitulate, and he could focus on the Eastern Front against the Soviet Union.
Gotcha. But the broader point was, one was they're going to sow terror, and people are, it's going to be a Moscow Maidan, which has completely failed. I think that was the narrative last year. This time, the terror, I think they struck like a Galactica supermarket. I wish we had Galactica supermarket in Donetsk, like last night. A couple of people died. So it's still just terror. And if that terror is meant to create chaos in Russia, I know it's doing the opposite. So it's every aim they put out there at the NATO headquarters. It's just they're just achieving the opposite. That's the broader point I wanted to make.
Yeah, I think the oh gosh, what I had a thought, then I lost it. What was I going to say?
Sorry.
No, it's good.
50%
The main
better than
thing
I'm
is the
doing.
biggest. I remember what it was. The biggest thing is, I think Alex touched on this earlier, was that the big difference. I think this started earlier. I think Crocus City, the Crocus attack,
Yes.
started this, and that Christmas Day parade started this. I mean, and this, I think the Kursk is really just the last nail in the coffin. That is when it comes to Ukrainian statehoods.
Yeah,
Because,
that's what I meant. Yeah, statehood.
Right, because the especially the Istanbul talks, all those talks, there's always this idea that Ukraine will exist as a state. Originally in that Istanbul talk, Ukraine could keep all of its territory that it has as of 2022. That went off the board. Okay, you're going to lose 4 territories, and that's not negotiable, but they can still keep statehood. Now, I think it's becoming increasingly clear that that Ukrainian statehood simply cannot exist. And I've heard from Russians too there, because it's kind of a debate. Did Putin's government make a mistake basically acting preemptively in February of 2022? And even then, because I've had even very Russians I respect, Russian people I respect who are very well educated, very smart, say it's maybe a mistake to do that, because we don't have that elusive moral high ground. Maybe it was better.
I imagine that was a bigger debate in 2022 than it is today, right?
Well, because if Ukraine had very clearly struck the first blow by doing a full-scale intervention or invasion in Donbass, then Russia could say, oh, well, we were just responding to that. Well, I think it's very clear from looking at Kursk what exactly that Donbass invasion would have looked like, except Donbass has 10 times the population that Kursk region does. So, I mean, those mass killings, the bombing of civilians.
But that's what I'm saying. It's clear now, isn't it, Ian?
Yes, it's very clear now. Kursk is what they wanted to do to Donbass, except there's more people to do that too in Donbass, because you're looking at a population of 5-6 million, as opposed to a population of maybe on the border, maybe, I don't know, 50,000. I don't know what the exact population is, but it's a lot smaller than what they would have had they pushed into Donbass, and they absolutely could have with the forces they had.
Okay, I think we've handled the Kursk. Unless Alex has a thought, maybe he does. Go ahead, Alex.
Well, just about Donbass. I mean, thanks. My interpreter, when I went to find my lost family in 2019, her, I guess it was husband, or I think husband, he was fighting in the militia in Donbass. Unfortunately, he was killed in that fighting. And my ex, she had comrades in the militia, and I know another person he fought also in Donbass, probably some others. And on the left over here, there was a feeling of, we're sort of fighting the fascists of Kiev alone. We're not getting enough backing from Moscow, or they're hostile to our forces because we are left. And I think also if at the point of 2022, when the gay liberal Nazis of the West were gearing up to just do a blitzkrieg against Donbass, not only would it have been a strategically bloody thing, but there was a real kind of historical, social aspect to it, I think, I imagine, where you had miners in that town who were very pro-Soviet, or in that region, I should say, were very pro-Soviet, more so than any other. I mean, that region was added to the rest of Ukraine by Lenin and the Bolsheviks over complaints, I believe, to balance out all of the Hicks and the rednecks in the rest of Ukraine. So, you had an army of rednecks and hicks and Nazis ready to jump on Donbass and basically, commit, if not genocide, like a brutal bloodbath, like Israelis against Gaza, basically. So I think there was a clamoring, like my guide, him and his relatives who were in Donbass, they were like, F this to the third power, go in there with tanks and crush those bastards. There's a Jacobin element, in that Russian and Soviet history is, the phrase here, I forget what it is in Russian, but we do not leave ours, in the final analysis. The government may not like the whatever you want to call them, the left forces that were leading that struggle for years in Donbass, but in the end they couldn't let the scumbags in NATO, the Hicks, the rednecks, and the Nazis go and just do a Sabra Shatila Gaza on the Donbass. I think so. Yeah.
Well, I hate to burst your bubble on this one, but the Donbass is also redneck. I mean, I've met them. Sorry. But there is, I will point out that there is a different perspective. There is an element of the tail wagging the dog when it comes to Donbass and Moscow, because, and this is part of what led to the political impossibility in resolving the Ukraine dilemma, because on the Western side, you have Western Ukraine, who are the most hardcore banderist types, and they saw giving those eastern provinces any kind of autonomy as a surrender, effectively. So that was politically unacceptable to them. But when it comes to Donbass too, they wanted to join Russia. That was the only outcome that was going to make them completely happy too. I think if they had no support from Russia itself, they would have had to accept that Ukrainian solution, but the Ukrainians also didn't want to accept that solution. So it just, when both sides don't want a solution, of course, it fails. But there is, I think Moscow was dragged into this. They were not happy with the idea of taking, because these additional provinces don't benefit the Russian state. Because Russia is already inconsistently developed as it is. Having more provinces that are even more impoverished than what they already have is not beneficial. I don't think they actually wanted this solution of having to take on a part of Ukraine. It's very clear now. But Donbass, they're very much happy about it. But there is tail wagging the dog here. Absolutely. So.
Yeah, maybe the Donbass people are hard-headed. That's what you mean by redneck. I don't. By the way, you're three Americans. You could tell me what the hell a sap is. Alex mentioned that he had one as a. Is it a weapon? What the fuck is a sap?
It's a weapon. Yes.
It's
okay.
So. It's a piece of usually soft lead encased in sewn leather, and police and criminals used to use them like 50 or 100 years ago. And you can use them
like a baton.
Up the scale of force, but more effective, because it's momentum, and it delivers such a blow at once that if you, depending on where you hit it, you can basically pain compliant someone and they piss off, or you can basically knock them out in one blow. If you hit them.
I meant to say this earlier, but I hope you're not carrying that around in St. Petersburg, are you?
Well, now I'm not. But I was.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I was just going to say, the police might not appreciate a foreigner walking around St. Petersburg with one of those. I'm just.
Well, it's more complicated than just a foreigner, but they actually prefer saps over here to knives, but that's a whole other debate. My buddy who fought in the Donbass was saying he works security here. He prefers like a Kubaton knife because it's multifunctional. And yeah, I haven't had any trouble with the security personnel with the knife I carry.
All I'm saying is if that the police are already unhappy enough with you for whatever reason they want to search you, it's better for them to not find that.
Yeah, and you should be
That's
glad
all I'm saying.
you don't have as many knives as London has, which is now the kniving capital of Europe. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Guys,
yeah.
like
Anything else?
Yeah. I think Kirk's 2.0, I think, yeah, we've looked at it from all aspects. What do you guys think?
Yeah. It's funny that my friend went to Britain and he commented that he had a small little pocket knife and they actually confiscated it. This was like years ago. And he was angry because they didn't give it back. Like they stole it. He's like, those motherfuckers stole it. They wouldn't even give it back, you know.
And that's how the British Empire was made.
It's weird how they have so many knives there now and everybody's getting knifed. But yeah, I was jealous earlier when Ian said that he had a thought that escaped him. And because I haven't had many thoughts at all to escape me. And so it's just one of those mornings. But no, it's a good, interesting discussion and back and forth. There's a little bit of disagreement on the cultural nature in the Donbass, and that's okay. But yeah, do we want to address any other topic? I think we handled that Kursk incursion and Nord Stream.
I think it was a very good, fruitful exchange, but we're kind of okay for the day.
I think it's good. It's a good stopping point.
Okay.
Thank you.
I like the positivity from the viewers. So yeah, thanks for that. So we actually do have Slava's going to return on Tuesday. She was watching earlier. She's not available to on Fridays to join us as a guest, but she can join us on Tuesday. So she wanted to specifically discuss Ukrainian identity. She says there's some
I am here this Tuesday. That's
about you know, the Ukrainian nation, like, are Ukrainians just confused Russians? And so we wanna hear her take on that. But yeah, so that's next Tuesday. But I appreciate Alex being our special guest from St. Petersburg. It's like the people's own Chuck E. Cheese. He's in a little private room that hopefully they won't charge him for. While the youngsters are playing video games and things outside. But and then Ian, thanks for coming on. Thanks for we linked to your article in our comments section, in our description section. So there's the there's
a
game
big
room.
cafe. Wow.
So they got some ping pong,
it's huge.
foosball, some lounge chairs. That looks like a real fun place to be. I wish I didn't have to work for a living. I'd hang out there all day. And Ben, of course, always is glad to have you back. What's that, Alex?
Very, very cute. The kids are very cute. Yeah.
Oh yeah, the youths of St. Pete's.
Youths.
Yeah, I just wanted to add. I wish I had time on Tuesday. Slava, I would have interrogated you exactly on the history, past and present of Ukraine. So I very much look forward to actually talking to you next Tuesday.
All right, guys. So on that note, we'll see everyone then. Thank you very much. Bye.
Have a good weekend. Take care.
Thank you.